My mother-in-law made it clear that anyone unwilling to pull their weight in the household chores was unwelcome in her home. She seemed to expect an apology from me, perhaps even some remorse for my supposed shortcomings. Meanwhile, my husband sat next to her, a subtle smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, as though he found some satisfaction in watching me be scolded. But instead of feeling the guilt or shame they might have anticipated, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. "Then I'll leave," I said firmly, without a second thought. In that moment, I realized I no longer needed to waste my energy on their expectations or judgments. They would have to deal with the consequences of their behavior on their own. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm 40 years old. I juggle a full-time career with managing our household, my husband, Andrew, and I have 3 adult children, all of whom have moved out to start their own lives. We had imagined this phase of our lives as a time for the two of us to enjoy each other's company, but that plan was upended when my mother-in-law, recently widowed and in need of companionship, moved in with us. Her arrival completely shifted the dynamics at home, which had once been peaceful and shared between just Andrew and me. My job is demanding, often keeping me at the office well into the evening. When I finally return home, the sight that greets me only adds to my exhaustion. The living room is cluttered with snacks, clothes, and general mess. Andrew, seemingly oblivious to the chaos, is sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand, watching TV, barely acknowledging my presence. Dinner is often not prepared, leaving me to handle the kitchen duties myself, my frustration building with each passing minute. In these moments, my mother-in-law often emerges from her room to criticize me. She insists that my long hours and business trips are no excuse for neglecting the household. She accuses me of failing as a homemaker, turning even the smallest misstep into an indictment of my character. Over time, I've learned that trying to argue or defend myself only fuels the fire, so now I simply let her vent, waiting for her to calm down. It's not ideal, but it keeps the peace, at least for the time being. I take a deep breath, absorb her harsh words, and then turn my attention to making dinner. Her criticisms sting, but I push through, knowing she'll eventually stop. What I find harder to bear, however, is my husband's attitude. He seems to enjoy watching me be chastised by his mother. "Women should appreciate their husbands. You lack charm," she often says, and Andrew echoes her sentiment, mocking me as I set the table. My frustration isn't just with her. I'm increasingly irritated by his passive complicity. Despite my repeated requests for them to start dinner without me when I'm late from work, they never do. When I finally arrive home, they sit there, waiting for me to serve them, as if I'm some sort of servant. The dynamic in our home has shifted drastically since my mother-in-law moved in. Before her arrival, Andrew was a true partner, helping with household chores, cooking meals when I worked late, and actively participating in raising our children. But now, he has completely stopped helping and has joined his mother in her constant criticisms. It's baffling and frustrating. She calls me lazy and incompetent, yet she's the one who's dependent on us. She has contributed nothing financially, despite inheriting a sum of money from her late husband. Instead of using it wisely, she squandered it on luxuries, quickly draining her funds and even accumulating debt. Now, she lives with us rent-free, as though we owe her something. The tension began on day 1 of living together. My mother-in-law promised to be considerate, even bowing deeply to show her sincerity, but it didn't take long for her to revert to her old ways. Just a day later, she began criticizing me for neglecting the housework. At first, her sudden change was almost amusing, but it quickly turned serious. She accused me of being a bad wife for focusing too much on my career, criticizing not only my housekeeping but my professional commitments as well. I tried explaining that my job sometimes required long hours, but she wasn't interested in hearing it. Despite my attempts to clarify, she dismissed everything I said and suggested I take a part-time job at the local supermarket, as if that would somehow be more fitting. She had a fixed idea of what a daughter-in-law should be, but no understanding of the demands of my work. Living with her became increasingly difficult. Every dissatisfaction she had, whether it was with the meals I prepared or our everyday routines, would turn into complaints. Even simple things like breakfast became points of contention. We used to grab some bread or buy lunch, but she disapproved of these habits. Reluctantly, she began following our household rules, but not without constant grumbling. Dinner time soon became the focal point of our disagreements. She insisted it be served promptly at 7 p.m., with at least 3 side dishes, and that everyone eat together. She claimed this was the norm for families, but my work often kept me past 7 p.m., making her demands unrealistic. Her rigid expectations clashed with the reality of my job, which was crucial to our financial stability. She didn't see the need for it, though. She suggested that Andrew's income should be enough and insinuated that my work was more about personal choice than necessity. When I turned to Andrew for support, he dismissed the concerns, telling me I would learn my lesson eventually. His lack of defense only deepened my frustration. It seemed he was content in his role as the indifferent, sympathetic husband who couldn't be bothered to help around the house. This irritated me even more because when we first moved in with my mother-in-law, he had been quick to side with her instead of supporting me. Since then, it felt as if they were a team, and I was the outsider. Whenever I tried to involve Andrew in the housework, my mother-in-law would step in, declaring that such tasks were the wife's responsibility, and Andrew said nothing to challenge her. This shift in dynamics confused me. We used to be a team, but now it felt as though I was carrying the weight of everything alone. Eventually, I began to notice a pattern. Andrew would smirk every time his mother criticized me. I started to wonder if he was uncomfortable with the fact that I earned more than he did, or if he resented taking on household duties because of it. This realization made me question many things about our relationship and what had changed since his mother moved in. Andrew couldn't openly voice any dissatisfaction. He was supposed to be the family provider, but I began to suspect he was quietly relishing this situation. When my mother-in-law first moved in, she frequently questioned my role in the household, openly asking if Andrew was truly the head of the family. This seemed to please him, especially when I was scolded, revealing a side of my husband I hadn't fully recognized before. Even after all these years together, I found myself spending anxious days wondering what to do. The peaceful atmosphere we once had was gone, replaced by constant tension. My mother-in-law was relentlessly critical, and Andrew was proving to be unreliable. Before she came, I hadn't felt the need to make any drastic decisions, but now everything seemed to be falling apart. One day, while I was out shopping, a neighbor stopped me with a remark that took me by surprise. She suggested I should be more considerate towards my mother-in-law. I was caught off guard and asked her to elaborate. She told me that although she wasn't fond of her own mother-in-law, she didn't think of herself as inconsiderate. Then she revealed something that sent a chill through me. My mother-in-law had been speaking about me. According to her, I was neglecting all housework. Our home was always messy, and laundry was piling up. She claimed that her rheumatism was getting worse because she had to do chores herself, as Andrew often returned home late from work. Hearing how I was being portrayed shocked me, depicted as a neglectful wife who relied on bread for every meal while my mother-in-law lamented about my supposed laziness. This false narrative had begun to affect how people in the neighborhood viewed me. The cold, judgmental reactions I was receiving now made sense. It was clear that my mother-in-law had been spreading these stories, painting herself as a victim of an ungrateful, lazy daughter-in-law. Despite her small, frail appearance, she knew how to play the sympathy card. The neighbor's accusing look made me realize just how much damage had been done. I felt that crushing embarrassment that our private family issues had become gossip for the entire neighborhood. I muttered a quick denial and rushed back home. As I entered the living room, I found my mother-in-law engrossed in her TV show, casually snacking. "Please stop spreading rumors," I said, my voice firm. To my dismay, she simply laughed and replied, "But it's true." Something inside me snapped. If she was going to keep up with these lies, then I was done pretending to be the dutiful daughter-in-law. The very next day, after work, I was met with the usual demands for dinner, but this time, I didn't engage with my husband or mother-in-law's complaints. I went straight to the kitchen and prepared just a single serving of instant ramen for myself. My mother-in-law's face flushed crimson at the sight, and her protest grew louder. "So, this is your way of showing you're the worst daughter-in-law, huh? Not doing any housework?" She seethed. "Fine, if that's how you want it." I ate my noodles quietly, letting her simmer in silence. Eventually, she turned to Andrew, seeking his support. When he approached me, I laid it all out. "Mom's been telling everyone that I'm a terrible daughter-in-law, neglecting the housework." When I confronted her, she doubled down on it. "So now, I'm just going to stop doing everything she's been accusing me of. I'm only doing what she's telling everyone I do," I said, recalling the neighbor's words from the day before. Andrew, looking concerned, tried to play peacemaker. "Mom probably exaggerated. Don't be so stubborn," he suggested. Even though it was clear his mother was in the wrong, he still sided with her. Too drained to argue further, I tossed my empty ramen cup into the trash, ignored his pleas, and retreated to the bathroom. There, I did my laundry and took a long bath in peace. As I soaked, a sense of relief washed over me. I realized that no matter how much I tried, I was always going to be cast as the bad wife. From that point on, I stopped participating in the household tasks my mother-in-law had been criticizing me for. She'd complain about not having freshly baked bread on my days off, but I held my ground. One morning, when I woke up and entered the living room, she demanded I go out and buy bread. "Why don't you buy it yourself?" I shot back. "I'm such a bad wife. After all, I'll only buy my own share from now on. You'll need to handle your food or pay for it yourself." I ignored her protests, made my coffee, and ate my bread. Watching her reaction, part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, but considering everything I'd been through, it felt justified. After finishing my breakfast, I tidied up only my side of the cluttered living room and settled down with a book. But the quiet didn't last long. The doorbell rang. Glancing at the monitor, I saw a group of 4 elderly people, all familiar faces, standing on the porch, looking upset, confused. I watched as my mother-in-law hurried to greet them. They filed into the house, and I was stunned when one of them immediately started berating me. "I hear you're the wicked woman who doesn't even care for her mother-in-law," she snapped. These were my mother-in-law's siblings and their spouses, her support network. She had spread lies about how I was mistreating her, claiming I wasn't feeding her properly and denying her a bath. They had come to intervene, to save her from what she painted as my neglect. being the youngest of 4 siblings, my mother-in-law had a large support system, and now, with their spouses included, 8 elderly people were in my living room, accusing me of being some sort of monstrous wife. Their accusations made my blood run cold, and I broke out in a cold sweat, feeling completely cornered. "This is a misunderstanding," I said, my voice trembling with frustration, but before I could say more, the eldest brother slammed his cane on the floor, his voice rising with fury. "Stop making excuses," he shouted. The others quickly joined in, demanding that I apologize and reflect on my supposed wrongdoings. Just then, my husband arrived, drawn by the commotion. As soon as my mother-in-law's brother began criticizing my upbringing, I looked to my husband for support, but to my shock, he didn't defend me. Instead, he added his own criticisms, aligning himself with the chorus of voices now accusing me. In that moment, any affection I had for him evaporated. I had always believed my husband was a kind person, but living with his mother had shown me the truth. He wasn't kind, he was weak, easily swayed, and unable to stand up to anyone, least of all his family. The tension escalated when one of my mother-in-law's brothers, taking my husband's words to heart, suggested that perhaps a divorce was in order. To my horror, everyone seemed to agree. My mother-in-law then offered me a second chance, but only if I promised to change and serve her and my husband better in the future. Her siblings joined in, urging me to be grateful, insisting that I would never find a kinder mother-in-law. They even came up with a plan. They would rotate visiting every week to check if I was keeping up with the housework and properly attending to both my husband's and mother-in-law's needs. Once they had settled their plan, they seemed satisfied and decided to celebrate their victory with a sushi outing. As they left, my mother-in-law couldn't resist one last jab, telling me to make sure the house was clean and the laundry done by the time they returned. I stood there, speechless, trying to comprehend how everything had spiraled so out of control. Alone in the cluttered living room, tears began to fall. My marriage had been happy once, before my mother-in-law moved in. Now, despite my best efforts, I was the target of complaints from every direction. A mixture of sadness, anger, and regret overwhelmed me as I sat in the mess that had come to define my life. A few hours later, my husband and mother-in-law returned. I was still sitting in the same spot in the disarrayed living room. My mother-in-law smirked as she walked in, her words laced with disdain. "Leave, we don't need a wife who can't do housework. Didn't I tell you to clean up earlier?" she sneered. Clearly tipsy, she demanded that I leave immediately. My husband, grinning, joined in, as though his support would somehow make me comply. I had reached my breaking point. I no longer had the energy or desire to fight for their approval. "Fine, I'll leave then," I said calmly. I stood up and made my way to the door, hearing their laughter behind me. They probably thought I was bluffing, but I no longer cared. I packed my things and left the house without another word. About a week later, my mother-in-law called me, panic evident in her voice. "Andrew says he has no money. What does that mean?" she asked urgently. I didn't hesitate to tell her the truth. "Andrew makes only a third of what I do. I've been covering most of our expenses, and the house is in my name. I'm planning to sell it, so you'll need to leave soon." There was silence on the other end of the phone as the weight of the situation sank in. She didn't believe me at first, but I told her to check the bank statements in her drawer. The line went quiet as she processed the reality. Then came the pleading. She begged me to come back, saying Andrew was lonely, but I remained firm. "I'm moving forward with a divorce through my lawyer," I said, cutting off her tearful apologies. With the help of a lawyer, I filed for divorce, citing my mother-in-law's unbearable behavior and my husband's lack of support as the reasons. The divorce was granted quickly, and I even received a modest settlement. When I explained everything to my children, they were understanding and supportive, agreeing that the fault lay entirely with my husband and his mother. After the divorce, I sold the house, and both my ex-husband and mother-in-law had to move out. They stayed with relatives for a short time before they were forced to find a small apartment. Without my financial support, they struggled to make ends meet on Andrew's modest income. From what I've heard, they now spend their days blaming each other for their misfortunes. Meanwhile, my ex-husband has been sending me frequent messages, asking for reconciliation and claiming he has cut ties with his mother, but I find these messages more of an annoyance than anything. I'm seriously considering blocking him to maintain my peace. Without their constant criticism, I feel free, liberated from the suffocating weight of their demands. I'm finally able to focus on myself, on my own happiness, and on living my life on my terms, focusing on personal fulfillment and well-being.